Hi, and welcome to episode 52 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson, a PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada.
Hi, I'm Tom Heisley. I'm a PhD student at the University of Stirling in Scotland.
I'm Stephen Hamblin. I'm a postdoc at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia.
And today we're joined by our special guest, Magdalena Sorger, who's a PhD student at the North Carolina State University. Magdalena, you want to say hi and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm Magdalena Sorger. I'm a PhD, candidate now at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. I work in Rob Dunn's lab. All right, so I work on ants. I do a whole bunch of things. Most of my projects are connected to genetics. I do some population genetics, I do some phylogenetics, and I do some behavior. And my projects are actually spread throughout the world. I have a project in Florida where I work on trapjaw ants, which are the coolest ants in the world. And then I have another project in Ethiopia and another project in Borneo.
I became aware of your work when I was on my honeymoon in Borneo, and the guide that we had, I got chatting to, and she was telling me all about how you were coming through soon to work on trapjaw ants, and unfortunately I missed you by about 2 days. Otherwise my new wife would have had to put up with me following you around looking at trapjaw ants. But I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about what you've been doing in Borneo and at Mulu Park.
Yeah, so actually this was my fourth trip to Mulu already, and I've been doing various things on each trip. So since I'm studying trapjaw ants mostly, my projects have been connected to trapjaw ants. So on my most recent trip, I was studying trapjaw ant behavior. So are you guys all familiar with trapjaw ants?
I am, but perhaps people at home aren't.
Right, so trapjaw ants are these really cool ants. So in general, when you have ants, their mandibles, they just open and close like regular pincers, I guess. And trapjaw ants have mandibles that are elongated, so really long. And when they walk around, they keep them open, and they look like little hammerhead sharks when they walk through the leaf litter. And so whenever they catch prey, these mandibles snap shut, and that's how they catch prey. And so these ants have actually used this mechanism to jump backwards when they do it against the flat surface, so when they do it against the ground. So that's what they're, I guess, most prominently known for, the jumping ants. And these are actually that's the only genus of ants out there that does that kind of stuff. And when I was there, I knew that they were jumping, and when we were observing them, we noticed that they were jumping forward, which was really odd because the jumping with the trapjaws is backwards motion. So we looked more closely, and I was like, well, what's going on? Is that new, or what is that? And it looked like they were using their legs to jump forward. And I actually followed up on that, and I glued together their mandibles and checked if they would still jump if I glued together the mandibles, and they did. And so it looks like these guys are using their legs to jump, which is something that is super rare in the ant world. There's only about 3 groups of ants, where there's exactly 3 groups of ants where jumping is known and that use jumping. And so that was a new observation, and I was down there last time when we just missed each other to look at that a little more formally and figure out what's going on.
So what are you using to actually study what's happening, and how does this fit in with the rest of your studies?
That's a very good question. So most of my project actually came about serendipitously, I guess. So I wasn't entirely looking for those specific projects, but I did more of observations in the field and found something and followed up on it, and that's how my projects came to be. And so that was one of them. I did not start off. So the project that I did that started this was a project the year before that, where I was there because I got a grant from Lewis and Clark Foundation, and I was looking at altitudinal gradients. So I was looking for intraspecific variation along an altitudinal gradient. So I was interested in if species do things differently as as they go up in altitude. And so my goal was to find a species that has a broad altitudinal range. And this trapjaw ant was one of them. So I looked at these trapjaw ants more, and of course, me studying trapjaw ants, I looked at trapjaw ants everywhere. And this is how I saw this behavior. So I actually found it in my last few days, and I did not have time to look at it more formally. But I took a bunch of videos and got super excited about it, and came back and wrote a grant for at the Explorers Club that I ended up getting to go back and study it more.
Yeah, so I just saw the video that you sent of it, so you've got that on YouTube now, so we'll make sure to put a link to that for our viewers. But I was just wondering, so you told me before that you had an interesting change to go into biology. So could you tell us about your story of how you came to be studying ants?
Yes, sure. Yes, I guess my background's a little unusual. So I did not grow up loving bugs and crawling around and looking at ants. I actually, well, I started off in a school that was more directed at tourism and the economy, where I learned like foreign languages, and I worked in, well, I thought I would want to be like a hotel manager or something like that. And then when I continued to university, I actually went to university for international business administration. So nothing connected to science, no scientists in the families, nothing like that. Both my parents are also have also business degrees and have worked in business. So yeah, everything was going well, and that's what I was doing. I wanted to become a manager, and maybe at a high-profile consulting company or something like that, where I would have earn a lot of money and have a nice car and things like that. And at my, what was it, I think 2 semesters before the end, I went on my exchange semester, which was a requirement for my degree. And I went to the University of Illinois. And the nice thing about American universities and when you do exchange semester there is that you can take other classes than only what your major is, in my case, business. Because in Austria, if you study business, you take business classes. And I don't know how it is in your countries, but maybe similar. But yeah, so there's very little opportunity to figure out what else you might like, or to spread out into another area. And yeah, and so in the US, in Illinois, I had that opportunity. And so I took a psychology class and I took a biology class. And you can already, I guess which one it was that made a massive difference. And it was a class on animal behavior. And it was a 400 level class with me having a 0 biology background. So it was hard for me, but it was the most exciting class I have ever taken. I was thinking to myself, well, that's not right. I'm at the end of my business degree, and here's this biology class that's more fun than everything else I've ever taken. And yeah, it was actually a specific question that they asked us. The TA, his name was Chris Smith, or is Chris Smith, he was doing video showings once a week, and he asked us, well, so what's your favorite animal? And like fish or mammals or birds or insects. And for the first time in my life, I thought about it. I was like, okay, what animals do I like? And I realized that I thought insects were really cool, because it's all these crazy behavior and this crazy how they look and what they do, and you can't really see it with the naked eye. So you have to look really closely to see it, and that really fascinated me. And the instructor, Andy Suarez, and Chris, they were both working on trapjaw ants, actually. So this is where it all comes together. And yeah, and so they showed us videos about, high-speed videography, jumping, and I just remember watching that video. 100 students in the classroom, and we watched this 10-second slow ant going, and you can look that up on YouTube. If you look up trapjaw ant jumping, it comes up immediately. I think it's really highly viewed. And so it's this ant who just super slowly makes those saltos in the air, and then as it drops, it just looks really violent and hits the ground. And there was this classroom laughing at it. Yeah, and I don't know, after that, after the class, I like came by and I talked to the instructor, and I talked to Andy and I talked to Chris, and stayed in touch with them because it really like sparked an interest. And so after my exchange semester, I traveled a lot. So I went to places like Hawaii, and I went to Yellowstone National Parks and a whole bunch of other national parks in the U.S. And I just paid a lot of attention to the little things. And and then somewhere along the way, and I can't even tell you how it happened, like it clicked, and it was ants. And I came back and I was like, I want to learn everything about ants there is to learn, and this is what I want to do. And came as a little bit of a shock to a lot of people around me, especially my parents. But yeah, so at first I didn't even know that you could make a living studying these things. Like I said, I had no biologists around me or scientists in the family, so I didn't know any of this. So as I learned about ants, like I bought a book, and then I just had so many questions. And so I just found 2 Austrian ant biologists, and these are Birgit and Florian Schlicksteiner, who were in Australia at the time, actually, on their doing a postdoc. And they emailed me back, and they had all these, they were like, oh, that's awesome that you're interested. Here's some stuff. But they gave me a contact at the museum in Vienna. And there's somebody at the museum there who also works with ants in the Philippines. His name is Herbert Zettel. And he invited me to come by to the museum. And of course, I took that chance and I came by, and it was instantly a perfect fit. And he decided to teach me. And so he started to teach me from absolute zero, because I have never seen a microscope up close before that. Yeah, and that's kind of how things started. So at that point, I still did an internship in business. That was, not that exciting, and I realized that fortunately I wasn't making much money on that, because if I would have, maybe I would have been a little bit distracted by that, but I wasn't. So it really made me focus on what I'm doing, and what I was doing was just, I don't know, like it didn't add anything to my life. It didn't. The whole time I was sitting there doing stuff, I was like, well, the only person who benefits from me doing this is the company, and they gave me a little bit of money for it. But to me, this is my life, like 5 days a week, from 9 to 5 or longer, getting there, like that's it. That's all I have. And I'm supposed to do this for the rest of my life. And so so this was a 6-month internship. So after about 3 months, I said, I can't do this, because I couldn't go to the museum anymore because of work, like the work days just didn't work out. If somebody was in on the weekend, maybe, but so it was hard. And so after 3 months, I said to them, I can't do this anymore. So I was ready to quit, but then we found a solution where I would work only 4 days a week instead of 5. Yeah, and I ended up going to the museum, and that was the point where my teacher said to me, okay, I can see you're actually serious about this, so let's start scientific work. And we started to work on our first taxonomic description, like species descriptions of species from the Philippines. And yeah, and so that was the start of my scientific career in the museum in Vienna, which is a really cool place to start, because not many people do that anymore. Because of course you don't get paid for that. I mean, even like 90% of people who love this, and well, not 90%, but a lot of the people who you'll find there do this work in their spare time because they just love it so much, and maybe they get paid a little bit, but usually it's not their day job to do this kind of work. And I'm talking about morphological, work. Morphometrics and species descriptions with no genetics, because there's no funding for that kind of stuff. So really old school way, how people used to do it. And so that's what I was trained in. And how I eventually got here is that the entire time I stayed in touch with the people in the U.S. And at some point, Chris, the TA, said to me, well, would you consider, now that you're done with your degree, would you consider coming to the US, for grad school or something? And I was like, how? And it turns out people are paying you for that. I didn't know that. And yeah, and eventually Rob, I got in touch with Rob, in whose lab I'm now, and that that also was a perfect fit. I could not have a better advisor. He supports me on everything I do, and it's just, yeah, he's incredible. And so that's how I got here. That was a long story.
That's pretty amazing, because Rob Dunn's lab is a very prestigious lab. So to go from business school with no experience of ants to get in there, that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he took a chance.
So what was your first project in the lab, and how did that work out for you?
In the lab here, in Rob's lab. So Rob at the very beginning, actually, he did not want to push me into a project in the beginning. So he wanted to see what I would get excited about it, because it is really important to him that people are excited about what they do. So my first project, I was going back and forth. I had a whole bunch of ideas, and I ended up going down to Florida. And so this is how this is actually the project that made it into my thesis, but I did not know what it would become before I went down there. So I just went down to Florida to collect trapjaw ants all over. And so there's this really cool system down in Florida where there are those inland sand ridges. Have you guys ever heard of those? So those sand ridges,
around the Archbold Research Station?
Exactly, yeah. That's exactly where that is. So that's the Lake Wales Ridge. That's at Archbold. And there's a whole series of ridges spread throughout central Florida. And there are these sand ridges that have this habitat called sandhill scrub on them. And they've all been formed a long time ago. And two of the oldest ridges, they've been formed 1 to 2 million years ago. And so there's a whole bunch of endemic species that live on there, that live nowhere else except on those ridges. And there's a trapjaw ant species, which is called Odontomachus relictus, that only lives on those two ridges. And so, of course, it sparked my interest. So I was like, well, I got to go and check it out and, collect it. And I went to Archbold, and I talked to Mark Dayrup, who is the insect guy, the ant guy down there, and asked him about the species. And I said, I want to collect it. How do I go about it? And, well, there was not much known about that. He essentially told me everything he knew, and he told me that they're active at night. So my plans very quickly changed from, I assumed I would be, hanging out there during daytime and collecting my ants, to a night activity only. But then other than that, I mean, nothing about their nest architecture was known, how big their nests are, where exactly to find them. So I essentially just walked out there and tried to figure it out, and I found my first ant, and I was like wondering, well, is this the same nest as the ant 5 meters from there, or is this a different nest? Where is your nest? So I like to talk to my ants while I'm out there. So what ended up happening, I used aggression. So aggression is usually, for ants, that's a good way to figure out if, so non-nest mates are usually aggressive towards each other. So it's a way you can figure out whether you're dealing with the same nest or a different nest. So I thought, perfect, that's what I'm going to use to figure out what the nest boundaries are, or how far they forage, or something like that. And I didn't find aggression. And I went even, 5 miles away, and I found no aggression. I thought that was really odd. So I went all the way to the other ridge, which was, really far away. And there I finally found aggression. So it was really interesting. I knew that something was going on within the ridges where there was no aggression, and between the ridges where there was aggression. And what I ended up finding, so I looked at I had their aggression pattern, but then I also looked at their genetics, and I looked at CO1, which is a barcoding gene that can be used for species level differences. Usually about a 5% difference or more can be an indication for that. And I found an almost 5% difference between the two ridges. So what I might be looking at is that these populations have speciated since they have been separated for so long on those ridges and have been isolated over this long time. And so that's my project down there.
Cool. You have a very good very good luck with things rolling your way.
Yeah, and I can keep going and tell you about the Ethiopia project.
I think Steve has got a question. We'll let him get in.
I'm actually just, as someone who doesn't work on bugs or go into the field, I'm actually interested by this transition you've made, because I know a lot of people who end up as field biologists are outdoorsy people and did their whole life doing that. But how was that transition for you? How did you, was it smooth? Did you just hop out there and feel like it was natural, or did you stumble a lot? Or
So the idea of going into the jungle, you have these ideas of Indiana Jones and Lara Croft and those kinds of things, and it's just really
that's how I
cool.
picture it, yeah.
Exactly. So I had those same ideas, and I was like, wow, I really think I could do this. I think this would be so cool. But I didn't know. So my first field trip was actually to Guatemala, and this was before I came here to the US, and I paid for this myself. So this was just my first trip to something tropical, subtropical. And it was essentially for me to figure out if I liked that or not. And so I went there, and I liked it, but the station, so it was an ethnobotanical field trip. It was about learning about the Mayas, about their medical plants and things like that. But I talked to the person who organized it and asked them if I could come, but collect ants instead. And he liked the idea, and so he said, yeah, I'm going to support you with that. And so I went there, and it was at this field station that was a secondary forest, and it was cool, but it was not, it wasn't the real jungle. But then, through a lucky incident, I actually got the opportunity to go to the real jungle. And I went on a 5-day trip to see some half-excavated pyramids. It's called El Mirador. It's somewhere close to the Mexican border in the north of Guatemala. And this was a trip, this was the real deal. So this was a 2-day trip to go there by foot. You had to carry your own stuff. There was a camp there, no water anywhere because there's a shortage of water there anyway. So no showering or anything like that because it was just not possible. And then one night staying there, so one night to go, overnight there, then staying there, then going back. And I mean, we had tents. We were sleeping in tents, and I remember it was a 2-people tent. And I don't know if you guys know tents, but usually if you have 2 people, you want a 3-person tent because a 2-person tent fits 2 people, and that's it. And that was a 2-person tent that fit 2 people. And so I just remember when we were walking there, I mean, we were not clean. And and we were just lying in the, and I got along with I was in a tent with a girl, and we just met on that trip, but we got along super nice, and which was good. And I just remember that we were lying next to each other, and whenever we would touch each other, it would stick a little bit. I can't believe I'm telling this story. But it was just really funny, and I guess what I'm trying to say is it was very basic, and it needs to be your thing because that's what it's like. And so the other thing is, I mean, there are bugs everywhere, and I used to be afraid of spiders. I used to be afraid of all of this stuff, so I understand it, and my brain, I think, somehow hasn't 100% transferred into. So I still, when I see a spider, I think, wait, aren't you afraid of that? I'm like, no, I love it. I want to touch it. So it's this really funny thing. So I still very much remember what it's like not to like those things. And so on that trip too, I mean, there were bugs everywhere. There were spiders everywhere. There were spiders in the tent. The nice thing for my tent roommate, I guess, was that I was collecting everything. So everything we had in there, we didn't have to worry about getting it out of the tent, but I was just collecting everything that was in there. I had my little kill jar, and that worked.
It's
but
easier
yeah.
when your data comes to you.
Excuse me?
I guess it's easier when your data comes to you.
Right. In that case, yeah, that's exactly what happened. But to me, I mean, so like I say, it was a very basic experience, and there was just very little luxury in general, and for me it was to figure out if I would be okay with that. And as I kept going, and so this was not a collection trip, so people would not stop and collect ants with me, But I just had to walk really fast, and there were mules in the back who were carrying our food. So I just had to walk really fast, and once I found something that I wanted to take a video of or collect, I just had time until the mules came. And then I had to walk really fast again, and that's what I did on this entire trip. And and then I remember I saw my first trapjaw ant, and this is Guatemala. This is a place where you're not supposed to, just like touch into the leaf litter, because there's lots of snakes and there's lots of stuff that's really dangerous. But I saw this trapjaw ant, and I just went for it without even thinking about it twice. So I started diving into the leaf litter. And I got her, and I was just the happiest person in the world, because the stuff that I only saw on videos before, like I had one in my hands. And then and then I saw army ants for the first time, like the ones army ants were used by the Mayas to sew wounds. They are the ones with the sickle-shaped mandibles. Have you guys ever seen those?
No.
Mm-hmm.
They're really cool. So the majors have sickle-shaped mandibles, which you can use. So essentially, you can use them on a wound like this, and they will grab into your skin and sew the wound this way, and then you just rip off the body and the head. It forms it's like braces, I guess, on the wound. And so I saw these guys, and of course, I touch everything I see. If it's an ant, and it doesn't matter how much it stings or bites or something, I'll touch it first, and then I'll know what it does. And so I did that with the soldiers of the army ants, and of course it bit me, and I freaked, I screamed, and I ripped it off, and of course I did what the Mayas did, because the head stayed in there, and it was launched into my skin. And so even when I tried to break it off, a piece of mandible would stay in there. So it was but it was cool to try out those things. And then when we finally got to those pyramids, to those ruins, I mean, it was not touristy at all, because there were only archaeologist stores there. So only backpack tourists who did this trip, this 5-day trip there, and people who were really rich and had a helicopter and could go there, were there. Otherwise, there was nobody there. So the day that we visited those pyramids, we were there essentially by ourselves, which was really nice. And we were just camped, so there's no electricity there. And so we were camped outside a little bit outside the camp, and it was just pitch dark there. And I just remember when it turned night, there were fireflies everywhere. So it was this such a magical place. With all those, I don't know. So to me, it was pretty clear after that trip that is what I want to do, and I can do the tropics, and it's all real, and it's all possible, and it's right there. Yeah.
Oh, and you came back with the best souvenir of all of it, an ant head stuck in you.
Right?
This guy stayed in that.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, I think we're pretty much out of time at this point, but how can people follow along with your research and your career as you jump from awesome opportunity to awesome opportunity?
Yeah, so I have set up a website for my stuff, and it's called theantlife.com. And I'm constantly updating things. I also do macro photography, so my pictures are there, and I have the video of the jumping trapjaws is on there, and there will be more videos to come, because I have lots of video material of just crazy and cool things out there. So I that's the best way, I guess, to follow what I'll be doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It was great hearing about your experiences and getting into the jungle with you by that. So, anyways, if you're listening at home and you want to hear past episodes of Breaking Bio Podcast, you can find us online at breakingbio.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at Breaking Bio. Hope you join us next week, and we'll see you later.